Well, we've been talking about what are some practical things that we can do, some steps, some actions that we can take to be intentional, to move from living as a victim, knowing that we've been victimized, but to walk as a victor, knowing that Jesus gives us a path to walk victoriously. And so today we're going to continue part 2 of the conversation of what it looks like to walk as a victor versus a victim. Welcome to Celebrate Recovery Official, a podcast that shares life-change stories, courage, hope, and leadership wisdom, all centered around the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5 and the Celebrate Recovery principles where Jesus helps us to face our hurts, our hang-ups, those nasty core beliefs, and the habits that may have us stuck, or defenses, protections that keep us from walking in healthy community with others, in communion with the Father. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the Global Field Director with Celebrate Recovery, and it's so good to be here with you. Again, thanks for the reviews and the 5-star ratings that you're giving us to help us get the word out wherever you listen, on whatever platform. We're grateful for your support and your prayers, and even some topic ideas that are coming in. It helps us to feed you the day-to-day as you're in between meetings and going about your life and trying to celebrate recovery well as you walk with Jesus in a healthy community. Well, last episode, we talked about some practical things. We're in this conversation of getting out of this mindset of living as victims, knowing and honoring that we've been victimized, and we're not trying to belittle that or shame that. Some hard things some of you have walked through. And what's even more heartbreaking for me is when the enemy convinces those that have been wronged and hurt that this is now your destiny. It's like, ugh, that's a hard place to be. And I just don't want my brothers and sisters to believe that lie that what has happened to you has now become your identity. And maybe even some of the things that you've done as a result of that is now your identity. That's not what we're about. As we talked about on the last episode, your identity is in Jesus Christ, and His grace rests upon you. Isn't that cool to think about? That He is with us, and He is, because of what He did on the cross, and we've invited Him in, turn our life and will over to Him, that we are more than conquerors, as Romans 8 I mentioned last time. And just knowing, as 2 Corinthians 12 reminds us, that His grace rests upon us for the sake of Christ. That even though hardships and persecution and weaknesses and pain in our life come our way, as 1 John 5 reminds us, He's overcome the world, the brokenness. And He will help us through those struggles so that we can fly, as Isaiah reminds us, fly like eagles, and run and not grow weary. So continue that conversation. As we wrapped up the last episode, we are just talking about just learning how to put into words, to cry for help, as Psalm 34 reminds us, knowing that He will deliver us. He will be with us. He's close and near to the brokenhearted. He's with you. And so kind of continuing that conversation is coming off of the expressing our needs, using I and me statements to express what we need without being in that blame game, is learning how to establish some boundaries. And boundaries, we can get on a whole conversation on this, but who are the people, places, and things in my life that are acceptable? And even some of my own behaviors that are acceptable, as we on the last podcast is talking about awareness and acceptance to some of my thoughts and my actions. What am I doing that's not healthy? So part of this is boundaries with myself. But what are the behaviors that are acceptable and appropriate, and they're not appropriate in my relationships? Learning how to say no when necessary to protect my well-being. That's so important. And here's a tough one. As a victim mentality, sometimes it can be hard for me to honor others' boundaries. It's like, oh, Rodney, you're meddling now. This is not condemnation, conviction. Maybe God's speaking to you through my words. Please take this as conviction, not condemnation. I'm not shaming you, but it's important, as we talked about in the last episode, to take responsibility. I've not done a good job of respecting others' boundaries, because when we're victims, it's all about us. Victors know that it's not about me. It's about Jesus, and it's about me serving and loving others. But I need to be mindful and respectful of the boundaries set by others. As I'm setting my own boundaries, I need to respect the boundaries of others. So if they say, hey, if you call me and I'm not available, I'll call you back. Don't call me 12 times thinking that I'm not going to call you back. I will call you back. If I haven't called you back, it's because I'm not available. That's a boundary, right? And so what are the boundaries that people are setting around me? And if I had a tough time honoring those boundaries, and so I need to respect the boundaries set by others, especially with my family close to me, but accountability, sponsor, my ministry, church, whatever, I need to respect that. So, but what are some boundaries that I need to establish so that I don't get stuck in this victim mentality? Might be good to think about that. People, places, and things. Who's some people that maybe are not, they've got some behaviors that are not acceptable, and I need to set a boundary and say, hey, when you talk that way around me, it's not good. I would prefer you not talk like that around me, or to do those things around me. And if they can't, then I need to probably move away from those relationships. But learning how to say no to protect my own circle, so to speak. And there's a lot of fear in that, because part of that victim mentality is we're afraid, because we've been victimized, that this is our destiny and other people are going to hurt us. And if we set a boundary, then they're just going to leave us and we're never going to have another healthy relationship. But 2 Timothy 1:7 is a great passage around that fear. For God gave us, He gave you and I a spirit, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. I don't have to walk in fear. It's such a beautiful reminder that God will empower us with strength, love, that self-discipline to set those boundaries, to honor and uphold those boundaries toward others and those that are being set against me, and knowing that it's essential for my recovery and victorious living. I don't have to walk in that fear. I don't have to be afraid of man, as Psalm 29:25. Fear of man brings a snare, but fear of God will be exalted. So sometimes people are going to be disappointed by my boundaries, but I don't have to be afraid of that. So set boundaries, respect boundaries of others. Another one is that seeking support in healthy community, recovery community. And that's so important. That's what makes Celebrate Recovery so beautiful, is we start, even if we don't have a family per se, we do now in recovery. And we can begin building a new healthy forever family to build a support network. I can begin to surround myself with God-loving, Jesus-worshiping people who will support me and love me where I am, but not to be afraid to point out the cracks in my armor, that I've given permission to point out the cracks in my armor, that will encourage my growth, that will lift me up, that it will uplift me and keep me moving down the road. So who's my support network? And, a lot of times someone will say, well, I haven't been able to find a sponsor. And it's funny the number of times this has happened. You haven't been able to find a sponsor. Okay. How many people, the question I ask, how many people have you asked? Well, I haven't asked anybody yet, but I'm just having a tough time finding anybody. Okay, here's a problem. If you haven't asked anybody, it's going to be especially difficult. The odds are against you. I get it. It's scary, and you're scared of the big fat capital N-O. What if they say no? What does that say about me? Here's the thing. The enemy knows that relationships are vital for us. And so if we don't understand that and have expectations that we may get a few answered no's before we get our yes, we'll never ask anybody. It's going to be too scary. And that fear we were talking about just a second ago in 2 Timothy is that fear is going to consume you and you'll never ask anybody. Or I'll hear someone say, well, I asked one guy and he said no. Or I asked one gal and she said no. Keep asking. Sometimes people have too many people they're sponsoring, they're just not in a space. Get you accountability partners. If you're in a small group, ask, hey, can I just get a number where we can connect, or can we go grab coffee? Maybe they're not a sponsor, but just start building a network. Getting around people is a beginning part of that network. That's why going to the general meeting worship is so important. We get around people, we surround ourselves with other people who love Jesus, and we're reminded, as Hebrews remind us, don't ever give up on the habit of meeting with one another, as some are in the habit of doing. Get around people, meet with people. And let me just say this as a sidebar to that. Celebrate Recovery is an incredible tool. Support groups, networking, getting around a healthy community, find mentors, accountability teams, and people that will kind of nudge us when we need that. But sometimes we need professional help too. Don't be ashamed to consider therapy or counseling to work through maybe some significant past traumas that have you in this victim mentality. It's okay. And I'm telling you, a lot of therapists they've got Celebrate Recovery on speed dial because they know that clients that they have that are going to Celebrate Recovery in conjunction with therapy are way down the road. From those that don't go to Celebrate Recovery and are only doing therapy. So it's a good companion to what you're doing. Go to therapy. Don't just consider that. Therapy is not for everyone, but I just want you to know that that's a good option for you. Don't be afraid to consider that as well, to work through some of those past traumas. That there's reasons why you're in a place of victim mentality, and there may be some significant trauma that needs to be worked through, and God will use all kinds of different forms to get you to that healing process. Going to take a super fast break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation of learning how to walk victoriously versus walking as a victim. Stick with me. I'll be right back. Hey friends, have you heard about the upcoming summit? We've got a summit that's a big 3-day party. It's just an incredible time of celebration, worship, teaching, encouragement. You can find out all kinds of good information on our website at celebraterecovery.com. Go check it out. Even if you're not a leader, you're a participant, go check it out. And you can find more information about the Celebrate Recovery Summit at celebraterecovery.com. Hope you'll join us this summer. Welcome back. Right before the break, I was talking about considering professional help. There's all kinds of forms to get us to that help. It may be in conjunction with Celebrate Recovery. Another thought, though, around getting out of this victim mentality is just learning how to practice. Interesting when I even say the word practice. How many things did I practice that were dysfunctional? I'm good at practice. One thing I wasn't good about was practicing healthy choices. And one of the things, practicing self-care is so important. And victim mindset, victim core beliefs, again, find themselves doing things in the habit form or defenses, protections that confirm what they're believing. And so we stop taking care of ourselves physically and mentally and emotionally. We already hit on the emotional side in the last podcast, but what's some things physically? Talked about even just realistic goals, taking a walk. What's some physical activity? Now, again, you don't have to go work out for 4 hours every day. You'd be surprised just doing, I'm just going to do a few sit-ups today, or I'm going to take a walk around my neighborhood, or I'm going to, do some jumping jacks in my living room. Any kind of physical activity. I'm setting some realistic goals. This connects back to that conversation we had on the last podcast. But then what were some things? How am I eating? I don't know about you, but when I eat really bad, I feel bad about me. And it's not just because I gain weight by looking at something, but eating healthy We crave what we eat. And victorious people take care of themselves. That's something I can control. What I put in my mouth is under my control. And so maybe I need to invite my accountability partners into this so that I can, as Joshua 1:9 says, be strong and courageous. Hey, help me. I want to eat better. I'm giving you permission to hold me accountable. So what's some things that I can do physically? How am I eating? What's my menu look like? How am I sleeping? Do I spend way too much time on my smartphone right before bed? There's tons of studies out there that show that too much screen time right before bed will affect the REM of how we sleep. It's like only getting to the front porch of the sleep when we need to go all the way through the front porch, in through the house, and all the way through the back deck. We need sufficient sleep. So can I cut off my technology screen time a little earlier? Which, by the way, my physical activity and what I'm eating will affect my sleep pattern. So, all those things, the physical, then the mental, just again, the things I'm feeding my mind. What am I stimulating my brain with? Silence and solitude, having some quiet time with the Father. My reading the Bible and that kind of stuff is important. Prayer is important, but sometimes just sitting in silence can be one of the most edifying things that we do to help us to walk victoriously, to think differently, to get our minds still, which will, by the way, help with the sufficient sleep as well. But I think with that the mental health is, what am I learning about my area of recovery? And this is why therapy sometimes can be helpful. Getting around other people that have like issues can be helpful. What's some things that I can be reading? Or is there a course that I could take, even an online course? There's free courses all over the place. Some YouTube stuff that I can watch on how to. Maybe there's something I've been wanting to do. I want to learn and grow. I want to stimulate my mind with new and different things. A workshop. This is why going to training conferences can be helpful. Or the summit, with the Celebrate Recovery Summit that happens in California every year. There's great workshops that we can learn about ourselves. We can learn about ministry, leadership. There's also all kinds of good stuff. So am I continuously learning, or have I stopped that? And so there's some things that I can do, courses I can take. Maybe it's just reading a new book that I've been putting off, and maybe just for 15 minutes a day, I'm going to read about this. And that goes back to those realistic goals we talked about on the last episode. But I think with that, how am I doing embracing challenges? Do I look at challenges as, here we go again. This is my victim mentality. This is just my destiny. Maybe there's a challenge that's designed, that God's put in our life to grow us, because He wants us to learn how to walk with steadfastness and help us to walk in endurance, that these challenges are opportunities for greater growth rather than threats. And again, it goes back to that changing and shifting my mindset to new and different things, that not everything is a snake under a rock. There could be this is an opportunity to grow, not a threat that I need to run away from. Victims run from it. Victors lean into it, as Joshua 1:9 reminds us, that strong and courageous. That we don't have to be dismayed. The Lord is with us. Just a great encouragement in that verse that reminds us, encourages strength and courage, reminding us that God's always with us and He's guiding us through this. And so I can embrace the challenges in my life and walk victoriously. But I think victors, one of the biggest ones is, and it really resonates with celebrate recovery. The word celebrate is there for a reason. We have to be mindful and intentional about celebrating our recovery, celebrating the victories, even the smallest of victories, the goals that we've set. To be able to know that God is with us, and we celebrate that. So we're acknowledging our achievements in Christ. His grace is resting upon us. And that's why a gratitude journal is so important. Today, as I reflect on yesterday, what can I be grateful? Thank you, Lord, for giving me the ability to sit down and write that talk that I've been putting off and procrastinating. Thank you for the courage to call that brother that I made a goal to do. Thank you for helping me get to my Friday night general meeting at Celebrate Recovery, even though I didn't want to go, but I felt so much better. So celebrating those small accomplishments. Thank you for what you're doing in my step study group. Thank you for those that shared, that reminded me that I'm not alone. Thank you that I have another day's sobriety. And here's another part of that celebrating. Again, through that lens of Romans 8:28, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That you can just hear the reassurance in that verse that God can turn all situations, even challenging ones, into something good, providing hope and purpose in our recovery. So I can celebrate what he's doing, the purpose in the strength that he's giving me to face that. And here's the thing I think often gets forgotten, and it really ties in with that self-care. How are you celebrating that? Give yourself little rewards for reaching those milestones. This is why the sobriety chips are such a big part of what we do. You don't have to do those, but there's something special about saying, hey, I got 30 days. I'm going to pick up a coin. It's just a cheap plastic coin. There's something about just hearing the celebrating and the cheering on of our brothers and sisters saying, you did it, and I'm proud of you. I'm going to pick up that coin because I accomplished 30 days or 60 days, or let me pick up that blue chip for something new that we're focusing on. It helps us to stay motivated, and it keeps us positive, moving toward healing and recovery, resting on God's word, resting on his power, knowing that he's with me all the way through this so that I don't have to be alone. And guys, all these things that we're talking about over the last couple episodes are to help us knowing, again, we have to honor the victimization. What happened to you was wrong. You didn't deserve that. And I'm sorry you went through that. But here's the good news. You don't have to stay there. And that's not your identity. That when we begin to apply our part, knowing that Jesus has his part and the Holy Spirit coming to us, working in us and working through us, it begins to gradually shift us from this victim mentality to a victorious mindset that helps foster resilience, empowers us to a more fulfilling life. And don't you love that? Isn't that what we all want? That though you have gone through and you didn't deserve what happened to you, that's not your identity, and God's got bigger plans for you. He's going to find purpose in the things that happen to you. And you're going to actually, the biggest thing in Principle 8, as you learn how to walk victoriously, and rather than a victim, you're going to be able to help the next person that walks through the door that's looking for victory in their victimization. And to know that we get to be a part of God's plan to help, to bring hope and healing to others is such a gift. But we have to do our part in making sure that we're not feeding the victim. We're beginning to feed with new, different, healthy victor strategies that help us to walk victoriously the way Christ intended. And I just want to say this: if you're in a spot where you maybe you're listening to this, maybe somebody shared this on their social media, or maybe they texted it to you, hey, you should check this out. The first thing is, it can feel a little bit like, well, why did you send this to me? Or you think I'm walking as a victim? Try not to take offense to that, but be curious. I wonder what this person is trying to share with me, and maybe they love me enough that they see that I can walk victoriously. And if you've been walking in a victim mentality, I get it. I've done the same thing. But we can do something different. You can choose to do something different. And while it's not an event, it's a process. Christ will begin doing something new and different in your life, and you'll be able to walk victoriously and celebrate recovery, to experience what it's like to be renewed, and Him renewing, to be restored, and He's restoring as we walk this path and walk this road to recovery the way Christ intended. I hope this has been helpful for you, and maybe some things to think about. And maybe you're good, and maybe it'd just be some reinforcement to encourage you. But just want to remind you, you're not alone in this journey, and that we are in this together, and grateful that we get to celebrate our recovery together. And we serve and worship the same King Jesus Christ, who gives us the power to walk in that healing and the newness of life, that where we all long in our hearts to kind of punch the enemy in the face and say, hey, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm going to walk as a victor because of what Jesus Christ did. And that's good news. Hey, thanks so much as always for being with me today. I pray that you'll join me next time. Until then, God bless you.